So this week, just in case there's anyone new today, I don't think there is, but just in case, I'm Kalamali.
Nara.
And we're really grateful to be celebrating the birthday of Swami with all of you today. Thank you for being here and making time in your life to celebrate together. So this week's reading from the weekly commentaries of the Bible and Bhagavad Gita, Rays of the One Light, is on activity versus inner communion. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Last week, we contemplated the well-known story of Martha and Mary. Traditionally, this story has been offered to show the two classic approaches to salvation, the first through action and the second through prayer. The excuse of the Marthas of this world has always been, the church needs its Marthas too. Treatises, moreover, have been written to justify the Martha approach to piety, praising her self-sacrifice as perhaps an even higher demonstration of devotion. Thus do the unmeditative in religion try to justify themselves. Yet the fact remains that Jesus rebuked Martha. Elsewhere, moreover, he spoke of the virtue of feeding the hungry, curing the sick, and housing those who were homeless. It wasn't that he disapproved of serving people. Wrong attitude was the object of his criticism. What he was criticizing was forgetfulness of the true goal of right spiritual action. Good deeds, outwardly, without inner communion with God, will result in good karma, but will not bring final freedom from all karma. The path to inner freedom was described by Paramhansa Yogananda in these words: be always calmly active and actively calm. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 2nd chapter, he who is not shaken by anxiety during times of sorrow, nor elated during times of happiness, who is free from egoic desires and their attendant fear and anger, such an one is of steady discrimination. Do your duty in life, so counsels this great scripture elsewhere, but never lose sight of him to whom all actions should be dedicated. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh, 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 oh.
Thank you. It's really interesting. We've sort of touched on Mary and Martha in the previous week, and we talked about right consciousness, and I think this is really about the right consciousness. And I'm going to start off with a little cheeky story. I hope you find humor in it. But I traveled around the country as an educator, and one of the things that I did when I traveled was have a coffee for all those coffee drinkers. And each state, as you traveled, would claim to be, have the best coffee. And and I'm going to summarize this very loosely, and please don't take offense to it. But, we have the Victorians who have an amazing coffee, and they're registered on the world, I think, as one of the best coffees in the world. And so, you go to a coffee shop in Victoria, particularly a good coffee shop, and everybody in there is doing their job. You have someone that's making the actual coffee and grinding it and putting it in place and packing it and having the science behind it. And then you actually have one person beside them that is actually stretching the milk and making it nice and creamy and warm and tasty. And then you have someone that's literally just serving and taking people to come in, and you look at the menu and it's this food However, that they dress it to be absolutely gorgeous. You know, it's like their presentation is amazing. And each person in there, you feel the difference. These people, that is their job. That is what they've chosen to do. And then, of course, you come back to New South Wales, and New South Wales is kind of the busy state. And, you know, they come in and they don't worry about it. They just buy a really, really expensive coffee machine. They get the most expensive coffee beans in there. And then they have these machines that stretch the milk and scientifically proven to get in and out and do those kind of things. And, you know, the menu, they have a really good menu, but the people that work there are just because it's all about profit. So they're all in there trying to make profit. So they're in there and they just get the uni students that come in as a job. And so the people that are serving them and doing these things are rote in what they do, and they put the energy in and they are doing it to help pay for their university. And you get up to good old Queensland, and Queensland are kind of like, well, we're not too fussed about the expensive stuff. We're not really fussed about that. They're more about, well, what's the weather doing today, and is the surf good? So really, it's a service. It's like, hey, coffee does the same thing, whether it's good, bad, in between. It's open, it's beautiful. It's an awesome day. I'm going to serve you the best coffee I can. And because it's all about, well, what can we actually do the coffee for? It's more about I can get in, have a quick bite of energy, and now I can go back and do my surfing or getting out and doing my job. And this is going to be a little bit cheeky, but Western Australia, they're more like coffee. We're on to now the mushroom coffee. Forget caffeine. This is the latest research. We know everything about coffee. It does everything without the ups and downs. And but as you can tell, what happens is everything has its place. Everything has its ability. But when you think about it, when you go into a coffee shop, it's not what's actually happening. Why is Victoria known for its coffee is because they put their heart and soul into behind what they do. Like they individually take their role and their jobs and do it to the best they can, because that's what they've chosen to be. That's where they've chosen to be. So it's kind of
We got a heart. Love that.
little bit of a fun analogy around this activity versus in a communion. And so look, we're listening to Swami, and if you reflect on Swami, he was the ultimate about this activity, but doing it within a communion. And it starts right at the beginning. Swami talks about in his story of being here, he, as we all know, was an amazing playwright. And he has an amazing ability for communication. But very quickly in that world, he lost interest in it, because he said people were doing it for the wrong reasons. They were losing sight of what that creativity could actually do. Did it benefit anybody in the world? Did it bring them closer to the truth? Did it bring them closer to answer? And he quickly switched off to it. And it's interesting, for the time that Swami read Autobiography of a Yogi and gave everything, he gave everything because it was the first thing that he read that gave him truth in a simplistic way. It gave him answers, and he basically gave up everything, jumped on a bus, traveled 4 days, I think it took him, by bus to get across the country, and met his guru, Yogananda. And from that moment on,
Which was day and night, that bus ride.
Bus ride day and night. And he gave himself to Yogananda, and Yogananda saw his ability and saw his doubts and saw the things that he did, and told him from that day forward, he felt that he needed to write and he needed to teach. And Swami had great resistance in that, and because he had made a decision previously with his talent that that's not what he wanted to do, because he saw that people were using it in a different way. And really, it wasn't until Swami was actually in India, and it was I think within a couple of days or a month before he was kicked out of SRF, but he was reading something, and he was reading these stories about how consciousness in the world. There was no hope for anyone. And he was thinking, well, how can we change this? Like, what is that ability to do that? And soon after that, he was discommunicated from SRF, and he, went through a whole period of time of inner communion, and he didn't sort of lose sight of what was happening. And then, of course, we know Ananda was born, Ananda community was born, and he put his energy into it. But the interesting thing from the beginning story, where he looked at playwrights and looked at how they communicated and what they did, it was only the truth that he was interested in. And within that truth, he realized that truth brought freedom, and brought freedom in its true right. And he said, everything that I do is about freedom. I want every action that I do without freedom. And so if we look at our lives, if we look at Swami, and I'm going to paint a different picture, if we look at Swami, if he followed that path and literally just did everything for its outcome, then what would have happened? What would have even happened if he went to the monastery? He was a monk. He actually led the monks. If he just sat there and decided, well, I'm just going to meditate, what would have happened? Yes, his consciousness would have been there, but he would not have actually put forward. It's like if he just sat there when he was kicked out of SRF. Could you imagine all of us having our dream job, having everything like that, then being booted out? A lot of us would sit and sulk for a while. We'd go through a grieving period, and we would put energy in a different way. Our energy would focus downward and in a different way. And everybody that you speak to about Swami Kriyananda, he was always grabbing energy and moving it upwards. And so if you think about Ananda and its journey, he sat, and he obviously was always centered, but everything he did in creating Ananda was done in freedom. Everything he didn't do it with the thought of, this is what's going to happen, this is what I want to happen. He did it in the thought of, I am acting on God's behalf if I sit still. And he has an amazing story about he took literally the term, well, if I let God talk through me. And he was doing a talk one day, and he thought, well, I'm just going to let God talk through me. And he just stood there, and I think he said, was it 2 or 5 minutes? 2 minutes. He just stood there and waited for God to come through him. And interesting enough, it didn't. But he learned a valuable lesson there. He learned that there has to be action behind what he does, but the freedom comes without the attachment of the results. And you hear him talking about all that all the time. He learned to speak, he learned to write, he learned to do the things that he did in freedom, meaning it didn't matter if it failed, it didn't matter. As long as he did it with the action of, God is doing this through me, then that's God's plan. That's his play. It's his world. And that's how he built Ananda Village. And Jyotish and Davy talked about when Swami was overseas one day, and they had a saint come over from India, and they were there, and the saint didn't say much, but in the end he said, the tapasya that would have taken to build this village is amazing. And Davy and Jyotish, on their different paths, turned up at Ananda, and it literally was green hills. There was nothing there. Dust. And from there they lived in tents. They lived in these kind of things, and they didn't think about it as in like, well, this is going to be an amazingly beautiful thing. They did it as in every action that we do, we are doing for God, regardless of the outcome. And it's a really important lesson that tapasya, you can rise above. And Swami was a beautiful example of that. If you documented, and they are documented, all the trials and tributes and the tapasya that Swami went through to create Ananda, Ananda wasn't created by everyone just sitting and meditating and wishing that this amazing village would turn up that has beautiful views and gardens and
Meditation.
meditations and everyone's sitting around singing Kumbaya. Even now,
Or
if everybody did that, it would soon deteriorate. And Kalamali and I were fortunate to be in the village just after COVID, and there was a lot of inward communion there. And when you went through the village, there was lots of things. There was lots of trees. There was lots of things that were, outwardly that were down and around. But that's what would happen if we all just sat and meditated. That village wouldn't be created. The tapasya is the work that we're putting into, regardless, and we can get through tapasya because we can do it without the thought of it's failing. It's not failing. It's going to be there. It's not going to be there. Oh, this is how I want it. This is what I want. And Swami even did that one day. He sat there and looked out over Ananda village at the time, and they were just little cabins, and he looked out over it and there were beautiful lights across the valley, and he stood there and went, wow, I couldn't have thought of anything more. And he said that immediately he thought that, or I did this, that thought of I did this, his consciousness went down. He didn't have a very good feeling. The minute he said, oh, this is all for you, God, you did this through me, his consciousness rose again. And that's the gift I feel that Swami's brought into this world, is the fact that he did everything with the right consciousness. And with that, both anyone that was around were listening to a talk this morning, and Davey talked about the fact that every time Swami walked past them, they might not have even seen him, they could feel his uplifted energy. And that is the fact that he had this consciousness that was always spiraling upwards towards the right activity. And he was in freedom. He wasn't involved in the results. He just, all the things he wrote music, he wrote books, everything he said, oh, as long as I'm giving 100% and being a channel for God through this, the outcome is up to God, not to me. If you think about that, what an amazing world that would be. What the freedom that would bring you in everyday life, whether it's our work, whether it's our financial situation. I love how the fact that today's affirmation's literally to do with income, and it's about energy. It's the freedom to get through life without the attachment of where it's going to do, what it's going to be, how it's going to be. And one of the lessons, I think, that, from an Ananda perspective in Australia, and I think it's something that we as a group can really learn from Swamiji and attune to Swamiji with everything that we do, is that tapasya is not sitting on our hands thinking, well, I really love Ananda, and you know what, Swami was here and he said Ananda was going to be here. It's about, well, how do we open ourselves up to be channels to put energy into creating Ananda here in Australia, rather than sitting on our hands thinking, well, if we just keep meditating on it, some, person's going to come through and bring that energy in, or the right technology will come where we can have the ultimate in-person, building or property or whatever it is. But it's always opening up and saying, well, what is it? We've all found Ananda. We've all got that ability to come in and create something, but we can't create it just sitting and meditating. Meditating allows us to get rid of the onion peels and allow God to be the channel through us. But just sitting there won't bring the action. Doing the action in the right consciousness, in freedom, without attachment, is where we can move forward and be there. I know we might even finish off. Did you want to talk and we finish off with?
No, you go ahead.
So I want everyone just to sit and listen to Yogananda's words. I'll get everyone to close their eyes. And it's the poem, God, God, God. And as we read each one of these paragraphs, and Swami, Jyotish and Devi have all asked us to try and memorize this beautiful poem because it gives us the way out. It gives us the way to live in freedom. So if everyone just closes their eyes, sit up and just listen to these beautiful words and take them in. Think as we mention these words, how each one of these can be a part of or an action in our life. From the depths of slumber, as I ascend the spiral stairway of wakefulness, I whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl around me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams with threads of memories, then on that magic cloth will I emboss, God, God, God. Every night, in time of deepest sleep, my dreams and calls, joy, 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 and my joy comes singing evermore. God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, God, God.
Thanks, Nora. I just wanted to share some thoughts about Swamiji and his presence when he walked the earth, and share a story that is really powerful in itself, and it has to do with one word. But this one word and this example is a really good summary or expression of what you really talked about today, which is how Swamiji is an example for sharing light. And as Devi shared in her blog on Friday, he's the example of how light is generous. Light continues to give. Life is infinite. Light is infinite. And I was just thinking of how if you had a room, which is a certain space, and you turn on the light, it fills that space. If you make your space bigger, it will fill that space. If you make your space bigger, it will fill that space. And that space is a symbol of our energy. And so if you think of what Swamiji did, he just continued to expand until his space was so big it held all of us and all of us to come and the whole world, really. And so because of that, light could fill the space that was Swamiji. So what we can do, and I always think, Raul, of what you shared the other day, Swamiji gave us so much. What can I do for Swamiji? And when you go to that sweet element of giving, how can we give back? And doing it with that serving God, God serving God. Jyotish likes to remind us of that when we say, thank you for giving us the opportunity to help you on the blog. He says, God serving God. And it's that sense of, how we can take what we've been modeled and express it. And so that coming back to that word, it is actually Swamiji's last word on this planet in this lifetime. And that was the word anything. And if you listen deeply to Swamiji's oratorio, and he talks about Christ's attitude as a channel for God was anything, God, that you give me. I will do anything for you, God. Thy will be done. And that's what Swamiji modeled his whole life. When you think about when he did get kicked out of SRF, and we say that kicked out because it was really like that word, that expression really describes that experience he had. But it was this attitude that he had through all of that, which was, thy will be done, God. If this is your will, thy will be done. And it was the same thing with Ananda. He asked, what is your will, God? Do you really want me to share Master's teachings? And then he said everything just started to open and happen. And it was one step at a time. And I was thinking about that. That is, if you think about what we mean by living a life for God or renouncing the sense of the little self for the higher self, which Swamiji said is really joy. It's really blissful. And you think of, what does that take? It means renouncing anything that is your little self's desire. And that expansion into the higher self is when you become that limitless space for the light, which also means limitless joy, which also means limitless love. And so that sounds like a great place to be. And it's that word, anything you ask of me, my Lord, I will. Thy will be done through me, Lord. And so because of that, that's part of what grew, and it was a magnetism, because we're all these little moths, right? We're just attracted to the light, and we might try to like boop over here and boop over there, but it's not the real light. So until we get to the real light, then we can be at peace. Otherwise, we're just kind of, running around in the dark. And one of the things that really I just felt like it was important to share with everyone today was what it felt like to be in Swami's presence. And he was that expansive light and love that when he walked into a room, the whole room went still because we were feeling God's presence. And it was a magnetism that drew people from all over the world. And people would come just to sit and meditate with him. And what you would feel, they described it so beautifully, that love is bliss in motion. So when you would feel Swamiji moving through a room, you would feel love, and it would just fill the room. Everyone could feel love. And in that, guess what? They were like, whoa, I just felt so much joy, or my heart was exploding with love. But that's because he was attuned to God. And so he carried that vibration everywhere he went. But as we've joked about before, because Swamiji joked about it, the spiritual path is a little bit selfish because we all know that if we do things with this renunciation, what happens is we fill with joy, we fill with light, we fill with love. And in that, he was at peace. He was completely at peace. And when he did leave the body, there were a few opportunities to meditate with his body in Crystal Hermitage. And you would walk in and you could sit and meditate with his body in a crypt. And you would feel, again, that sense of stillness. And it would permeate the entire room. And it was like the same experience as when he was walking in a space. It was still completely present. And it's that attunement to Spirit's presence that means we too can never lose that feeling. We just have to keep practicing that attunement and letting God's experience of joy through us happening more and more. And we don't know what could happen here. It's so true. Anything could happen in this country as we just say, thy will be done. And let us be channels for thy light and generously give light. So thank you all for being a part of this celebration of light today, of the life of a great soul that has given so much to all of us. And so we have some music now from Swamiji that if you feel to join along, I think it will be very fun. And as you all know, you can leave anytime you need to, but we'll start with these pieces of music. So if you do have your songbook, this first song is Through All Trials from the oratorio. Sing along, everyone. We won't do mics because of Zoom's feedback, but we'll sing aloud wherever we are.